Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you, Dan. How you doing?
Good, good.
Good.
Were you at the meeting last night in Butte, Andrew?
No, I wasn't. I live in Billings, so I haven't been able to attend any except for the one in Bozeman. So
Just
I'm
curious.
guessing you weren't there either, obviously.
No, I had another conflict.
Yeah. I haven't heard anything about turnout or anything like that for that one. I was surprised when I heard how few people were at the West Yellowstone meeting.
Oh, is that right? I wasn't
Yeah.
able to make that one. I made the Bozeman and Ennis ones.
Yeah. What was I didn't hear much about the Ennis meeting. Were there quite a few people at that one?
Maybe 20.
Yeah. Yeah. I think not being able to give comment or anything like that is, keeps people from showing up for sure. But yeah.
Yeah. Mike, were you at Butte last night? You're muted.
It's probably a good thing. Yeah, I was there.
What type of a turnout and what was the focus?
There was 13 dudes there, and general focus that frustration that the commission did nothing, that pessimism that anything's going to happen on the Madison going forward.
And was that focused on both commercial and non-commercial or a particular area? Both?
Yeah, there was a lot of sentiment regarding non-commercial permitting that, you're going to permit Montanans.
Hey, all, I would just caution this becomes a live feed at some point, and we don't know exactly when that happens. I
Okay.
think maybe we should not have this conversation right now.
All right.
I think that's wise.
I seem to have problems with my speakers. Can somebody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna start the recording. Are we streaming to YouTube now?
Yes, it's live.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we are recording. It looks like we have one attendee so far. For those of you that have been to these meetings, you already know what we're going to be going through. We might have others watching on YouTube that didn't sign up, so there might be others watching out there. The problem is they can't ask questions. So the one attendee could if they choose to, but we'll present as if we have an audience because we don't know if we do or not out on YouTube. So my name is Deb O'Neill. I'm the Special Projects Manager for the Director's Office here at FWP in Helena. And we're here tonight to talk to you about the Madison River Work Group recommendations that were presented to the Fish and Wildlife Commission in June. The Madison Work Group will go over a high level of what they were charged with and why they were formed, but they were appointed by our Fish and Wildlife Commission. And Hope will talk a little bit about that in a second. But I'm here to facilitate the conversation and to make sure that we all know why we're here tonight. And the main reason is we want to make sure that all of the public watching can have their questions answered so they can make the best possible comments to the commission. Our comment period is open until October 14th. And we want to make sure that you have the right information, the accurate information that you need to be able to make the, really good comments to have input on the recommendations to our commission. This isn't, even though we only have one person that can speak, it looks like this isn't a time that we're going to be accepting comments. Comments will be accepted on our website, and maybe we could show that somehow, maybe Hope or Jen can show that later. But they'll be on our website, as well as an email or through postal service, regular mail. We'll be accepting comments. So tonight, your job as the public member of the public is to ask questions and listen to make effective comments. Let's see. What else? I think it's Commissioner Walsh here. I don't see him. Okay. So tonight we're going to go through some introductions, and then Hope is going to talk about the work group, and then go through the recommendations at a very, very high level. And then we'll open it up for comment or for questions and answers. And that's your time to ask whatever you need to ask. I want to just give you, before we get into the introductions, the why behind why we're doing this, why FWP is doing this. So after the work group presented their recommendations to the commission in June, the commission decided to lengthen the public comment period. They didn't want to rush into initiate rulemaking. So they decided to extend the public comment on these recommendations, and for FWP to try to reach a broader audience, to collect a more robust set of comments from people who might not generally be involved throughout this process. So we did reach out to over 600 emails that included chambers of commerce's, hotels, businesses along the Madison, restaurants, tube rental places, just different groups. We were trying to think outside the box to include them. So the commission asked us to get more robust comment and a longer period of time is why we're here tonight. Comment period again goes to October 14th. With that, maybe we'll do some introductions, and I'll call on folks the way that you guys show up on my screen. It might be the easiest way to do it, and I'll start with FWP staff though. Again, my name is Deb O'Neill. I'm out of Helena for our Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and we'll go to Andrew.
Hi, my name is Andrew Pulse. I've been recreation ranger, river ranger, and recreation ranger on the Madison for about the last decade, and process most of the reports and applications that are submitted by commercial outfitters and other commercial users of the Madison, and crunch the numbers for the Madison. So if anybody has any questions about any data or anything like that, you can certainly direct them to me.
Thanks, Andrew. We'll move on to Cheryl.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Morris. I'm one of the recreation managers in Region 3, and I was the manager of the Madison for the past decade.
Thank you. Let's see, we have Hope.
Good evening. I'm Hope Stockwell. I'm the administrator of the Parks and Outdoor Recreation Division, which is responsible for management of river recreation with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks.
Thank you. Jen. Maybe.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Hersom. I'm the administrative lead for State Parks and Outdoor Recreation, and I am here to help host this meeting and facilitate for you.
Thank you. And I'm going to introduce Casey too, if he's on.
Yep, I'm Casey Jesse. I'm one of the Fish and Wildlife IT people, so I'm here just to make sure this gets on YouTube and doesn't have any technical issues, hopefully.
Thanks, Casey. Morgan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Morgan Jacobson. I'm the Communication Education Program Manager in Bozeman.
And lastly, Adam.
Adam Pankratz, Warden Captain of our Southwest Montana, which includes
Thank you. And now we'll go through the work group members and get an order of how you appear on my screen. So we'll start with Daniel. Dan.
Good evening. I'm Dan Larson. I was appointed as a business representative for the Madison River Task Force. I longtime resident of Montana and have been an owner and managing partner of the Madison Valley Ranch, which is a fly fishing lodge. We're not outfitters, but we work with a lot of the fishing industry to service guests. And I also sort of spearheaded or coordinated, I would say, the commercial regulatory discussions that we had and that came to the recommendations before you.
Thank you. Who's next? Mike.
Thank you, Deb. My name is Mike Bias. I'm Executive Director of the Fishing Outfitters Association. I'm an outfitter on the Madison, and I'm a work group member.
And then we have Richard.
I'm Richard Gockel. I was one of the non-commercial anglers on the work group, and I've been a resident of Ennis for the last 10 years. Currently retired.
Thanks, Richard. Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian McKeon. I'm a fly fishing outfitter and operate on the Madison and some other rivers in Southwest Montana.
Thank you. And I think we have Commissioner Casey Walsh here, who chaired the group. And if you could just introduce yourself, and then Commissioner Walsh, I'm just going to turn it over to you to just talk at a high level about the work group, how you guys were formed, why, and what your charge was. So right after your introduction, you could go into that if you'd like.
You bet, Deb. Thanks. I'm Commissioner Casey Walsh from Region 4 and was appointed by the Fish and Wildlife Commission to be chairman of the Madison River Work Group. And it's now been 12 months since we started meeting, and we had 9 formal meetings, most of them in Bozeman. And then we divided up into subgroups to tackle the big issues that were charged to the work group. And the folks who headed up those subcommittees are on the call tonight. I think it's important to clarify what the work group was charged to do, and that was to develop recommendations for consideration by the Fish and Wildlife Commission. And we made those recommendations at the June meeting, and then those went out for public comment. And in the August meeting, we decided to continue public comment. That's what we're doing tonight. The specific charge for the group was created in December 2019 by the prior Fish and Wildlife Commission. And we were asked to create a recommendation regarding the allocation of commercial use trips for outfitters on the river, both the upper and lower river, and to create a recommendation on a process to permit new outfitters on the Madison River once those caps went into place. And then we were asked to review the rule language regarding all recreational use on the Madison River, including the walkway sections and rest rotation proposals that were put in place in that 2019 meeting, which we did, and we made a recommendation to the commission to roll back the rest rotation and the reversal on the walkway section from Reynolds Bridge down. Those were under ARM 1211-6702 and 1211-6706. Then the final thing we were asked to do was make a recommendation regarding consequences of permit violations. And with that, Deb, I think it's probably important to go over the specific recommendations that the work group came up with. Just a brief summary.
Yep.
Either Charlie or the members who were present to make those summaries.
We'll have Hope do it, but I did miss one work group member introduction. I didn't see him at first. So Mac, you want to go ahead and say hi?
Yeah, I'm Mac Menard. I'm with the Montana Outfitters and Guides Association Executive Director. I was appointed to the seat on the work group as an individual that had experience in complex fisheries management issues and have served on the subgroup with the commercial recommendations.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Mac. So I think we'll start with Hope going over high-level recommendations, each of them, and then also our staff response, our assessment of those recommendations at a very high level, and the fiscal analysis as well. And we do have 6 people watching on YouTube, it looks like. So people are out there watching.
Thanks, Deb. Good evening, members and the public. We thank you for joining us this evening and the time that you have invested in this public comment period that's open until October 14th is a very important component of the next steps in consideration of these recommendations for the Fish and Wildlife Commission. The Commission has expressed an interest in getting this important decision right and recognizes the impact and ripples, if you will, for a water analogy that the decisions on the Madison River could represent for how the department manages other high-use rivers in Montana. And so again, just an interest in getting the public comment in additional period. We'll go through at the end how you can do that online and display that for you. So getting into the specifics of the recommendations and highlights, the full information is on the Madison River Work Group website. So in fact, it probably makes sense now to show you how to get there so you can follow along. I'll go ahead and share my screen. And if you go to FWP's website, fwp.mt.gov, you can click on About FWP, scroll down to Public Comment Opportunities, click on Comment Online, and then scroll down under Other. The second one is the Madison River Recommendations. You can click there to see recommendations and comment online. You get this attractive roundup of our YouTube where you can play that YouTube there, but also here you'll see the detailed recommendations on commercial management, opportunities for new entry, commercial trips, recommendations, watercraft rental delivery, and so on. I'm going to go through that very specifically here at a high level. But before I do that, I'll point out here at the bottom is where the information is about submitting your public comment. Again, tonight is about answering questions, making sure you have the information you need to provide the best comment possible. And you can submit comments here online by clicking on this link, or you can submit them to this email address, or you can use this mailing address if you prefer that method.
And we will show that again at the end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing that screen for now. So highlights on these recommendations. First, to start, there's no change in the existing joint FWP and Bureau of Land Management special recreation permit that's already required on the Madison. That's known as the SRP, the special recreation permit. That SRP is administered by FWP through an MOU with the BLM, and it's required for commercial use, competitive events, and organized groups on the river. Pardon me. What the recommendations are proposing is a new Madison River commercial use permit that would be in addition to the SRP and used to allocate and administer commercial trips on the river. As part of that, it seeks fluid transferability for allocated commercial use trips. Permittees would be able to transfer allocated trips to other commercial users with an SRP, and those trips could be transferred temporarily or permanently. The recommendation includes a use it or lose it feature so that permit and the allocated trips would be forfeited upon no use for 3 consecutive years. Any forfeited trips would be reallocated to other commercial users through a lottery with preference to new permittees. For new entry commercial users, the recommendations recommend that those new entry commercial users would be able to obtain an SRP and then acquire allocated trips for the Madison from an existing permittee temporarily or permanently or they could obtain forfeited trips to do that. The recommendations also propose a commercial watercraft rental delivery permit, and this would be for companies that rent and deliver watercraft, which are primarily tubes, to Madison River users at access sites. And this is currently authorized through a shuttle permit. The recommendation is that a separate permit be established for those businesses to acquire more information, use it as a data collection point for more information about the amount, location, and timing of this use. And the permit would be restricted to the river between Warm Springs and Gray Cliff. I'm going to share my screen again here to share the map. There we go. So again, that would apply between Warm Springs here roughly and the Gray Cliff fishing access site for that commercial watercraft rental delivery permit. The recommendations also propose a river use data collection system. And while we note that the department has ample data on commercial use of the river because of the existing SRP process, there is a lack of comprehensive data on non-commercial use and more is needed. So the work group has recommended a specific river use data collection system. Part of that collection of data would be accomplished through a recommendation to have a non-commercial Madison River float permit that would be required each day with no limit on the number of permits issued, but the permit would be good for up to 20 people to float the river on that permit. The permit would require a leader to be identified and an alternate leader, and it would provide additional data on the amount, timing, type, and location of non-commercial float use. The non-commercial, that permit could also serve as a mechanism for authorizing non-commercial use in the future if restrictions on numbers were warranted. So that mechanism would be in place if that went into effect. The recommendations also propose a Madison River Recreation Management Plan to be developed upon having that additional data on non-commercial use. I believe it's after a 2-year period of data collection. And that plan would be developed to identify acceptable levels of use and management actions to be taken if the levels were exceeded. The recommendations also propose vessel requirements for the upper river, going back here on the map, so that there would be limits on the upper river between 8 Mile and Yellowstone National Park on vessels that are under mechanical power or have paddle or oar power. There would not be floating, inner tubes allowed in that area. But the objective there is to reduce social conflicts between floaters and waiting anglers or other floating parties. And then the river between 8 Mile FAS there on the top of this screen and Valley Garden would be excluded so that inner tubes would be allowed in that area. Lastly, in this high-level overview of recommendations, this Bear Trap Canyon area, there is a recommendation for a non-commercial Bear Trap Canyon float permit. The Bureau of Land Management has the jurisdiction in that area. It's not Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, so I want to make sure that that is clear. And a BLM representative did serve on the work group and was invited to the group to submit recommendations. The work group is also asking that recommendations be submitted to the BLM pertaining to bear trap. The bear trap recommendations, again, not FWP's authority, and the BLM will have its own process for considering those. But the work group recommended the BLM establish a non-commercial float permit for bear trap and establish 1-hour launch assignments for each party to help alleviate some congestion at the put-in. A little bit more information about what has happened since those recommendations were submitted to the department. They were presented to the commission in June, along with a department prepared assessment on the work group's recommendations that looked at estimates of what it might cost to fully implement the recommendations. That information is also included on the website for your review this evening as you consider your public comments that you might prepare. The first year of implementation would be the most expensive due to the need to develop or purchase new technology to implement the new commercial use permit, the transfer of commercial trips, and the non-commercial float permit, et cetera. We estimate it would cost $722,000 the first year because of that. And that includes that technology, but also an estimated 5 additional employees that would be needed to administer and manage the new portions of these programs. Thereafter, the department estimates the annual cost would be about $333,000. So touching on that. The last thing that I would let you know, just more about what happens next after we go through this public scoping process to be clear about where we're headed. The department will post all of the comments received online on the Fish and Wildlife Commission webpage after it's roughly a week after the public comment period closes on October 14th. And then we will be conducting an analysis and provide a summary of that analysis on the comments to the commission at its December 16th meeting for the commission to determine what next steps it might want to take. And so with that, I turn it back over to you, Deb, and facilitation of any questions that might be out there.
Sure, thanks. And I just want to comment on the analysis of the comments. What Hope was alluding to is we're going to identify themes. We will not be, the commission is currently getting all of the comments. They have the link to the comments. The raw comments, as Hope said, will be posted, and then any themes that we identify will also be shared with the commission, and that will be presented to the commission in December. I also wanted to mention the BLM comments again. You're welcome to submit any comments about the BLM recommendation, the bear trap recommendation, to us. We are collecting comments for the BLM. Like Hope mentioned, we have no authority there, but we will be collecting comments for the BLM, and we will be making sure that they get any comments that we have received on that recommendation. Let's see, before we go to any questions, I just want to mention that the people watching on YouTube, there's 9 watching. There was a comment on YouTube about stocking more browns in lakes. Of course, we're talking about the Madison tonight, so I will make sure Fisheries knows that comment, but we will be just moving on to questions about the Madison River. I see that Laura Howe is here. She's the only one that is able to ask questions, and so I pose a question to her to see if she wants to ask any questions. And Jen, can you help facilitate that?
Absolutely, Laura. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak right now. Hold on just one moment, and you will see when you can unmute. You should now be able to unmute.
Hi, I'm Laura Howe, and I'm an avid whitewater boater. I'm interested in this proposal because of bear traps specifically. I don't have any interest in the rest of the Madison River. So I have a number of questions for you. My biggest question is about the jurisdiction of FWP over bear trap. It's rather confusing to have this process that includes bear trap, but Fish, Wildlife, and Parks doesn't have any jurisdiction over it. Can you explain that a little bit more? Because in one of the work group meetings, the BLM rep mentioned that the BLM will take agency recommendations with them significantly. And it sounded like he was saying the work group recommendations would be weighted somewhat heavily. Even the FWP isn't even planning on taking any action on those. It sounds like the commission looked like they had the report about the staff review of the recommendations basically said, we didn't review bear trap, we're just signing it to the BLM. So that is really confusing. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure, Laura. I'm going to turn this over to Brian. Maybe he unmuted and maybe he can explain that a little bit better.
Hi, Laura. This is Brian McKeon, and those are very, very good questions. Within the state of Montana, recreation on rivers is the sole jurisdiction of Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, with one exception, or two exceptions. One of those would be if a river is designated as a wild and scenic river, which the Madison is not currently. And the other exception is in federal wilderness areas. And so, as you're probably familiar, if you're familiar with bear trap, that reach of the river is part of the Lee Metcalf wilderness area. And so the Bureau of Land Management is the federal body that governs recreation on the river within the wilderness reach. There are other access points up and down the river outside of the wilderness area on the upper river and the lower river that have land owned by the Bureau of Land Management. And so currently there's a relationship between the Bureau of Land Management and Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks in terms of managing a special recreation permit, which largely is required for guided use and a few other things like large groups. So that relationship is already there. And so as we are making recommendations on a river-wide recreation management plan, basically outside of the bear trap wilderness area, we asked the BLM, would they appreciate recommendations for that specific area from our work group? So it's really important to understand within the bear trap, the work group, neither the work group, which we don't have any, we just make recommendations, but FWP does not have governance over recreation in that reach. But it was, we did ask, and it was requested while we're looking at all parts of the river to make recommendations there. And so that's what we did. We understand the current form of recreation there. To give you a little background, and then the BLM has its own processes. So really all the recommendations that we're making as a work group for the bear trap, or any public comment that you might make, or any other members of the public through this process, those are recommendations from the work group, as well as the comment that comes in will be handed over to the BLM. And they felt that would be useful, they may choose to use that to investigate and consider a process to look at managing recreation in the bear trap. If they choose to do that, there's a whole process that's unique to the federal areas. They'll have their own sets of public comment, et cetera. So that's really just what that would be to the bear trap, is just, hey, here's some thoughts that we've developed from talking to folks, et cetera, hand it over to the BLM. If they escalate that and initiate the beginning of a management process. They'll have their own process. One of the rationale for our recommendations, the Bureau of Land Management does have limits of acceptable use in floating the bear trap that already exist. We do have ancillary, and I forget the exact number. I think it's something like they want to keep it to no more than 4 floating parties per day. Don't quote me on that. It's kind of a lower number because of the wilderness area. We don't really have any way to track. There's some infrequent ranger floats through the BLM down the bear trap. There is a sign-in box, although most people don't know about it, and it's not often used. There's not a great way to know exactly how much it's being used. We do know, the BLM knows from some of their floats that often the current limits of acceptable use are being exceeded. We do hear and have experienced as you probably know, there's a limited spot where you can launch rafts and float parties because you're going to run whitewater. It does take time to rig boats. And if more than one party shows up at the same time, that can cause occasional frustrations and congestion at that spot. And so really the recommendation is simply to require a permit to, float by the day. And then there's a further recommendation, which is to stagger those launches. The launches would actually be staggered 30 minutes apart. And then a user would have an hour window in order to launch. So you try to have no more than 2 parties basically close to each other. And then, there'd be launch windows all throughout the day. And then that would be useful then for the BLM and making further decisions. They want to set additional limits or capacity for how many floating groups would be allowed in a day. So that's, I hope that answers your question. That was a rationale for our recommendation. And then a little bit of the background into who governs recreation where.
So Laura, does that help? Did that answer your question?
Oh, a little bit, but I do have a follow-up question. Thank you very much.
Sure.
So it's confusing to me how bear trap got included in this whole process because it was excluded from the user survey and it was excluded from the EA. And it doesn't seem like these are just ideas that are going to the BLM. It seems like these are going to be formal recommendations from the agency that they could use later then to justify incorporating what process has occurred here in the future to say, well, we've already got this, so we've covered something. So that's one of my big concerns, and I just don't understand how it doesn't seem like you're telling me what I'm reading in other documents like NEPA and going through the survey that specifically said it excluded bear traps. So I don't know if you have any.
I'll let Brian answer the how again. Maybe he could be a little bit more clear, but I do want to be clear that these are not agency recommendations from FWP. These are the work group that was appointed by our Fish and Wildlife Commission. It's a citizens work group.
Right.
So they're not recommendations from FWP. I just want to be clear about that. And also clear that the BLM is not taking action on these recommendations. He mentioned that at a meeting last week. They have a process that they would have to go through to include robust public comment on this if they were to implement any of these recommendations. So these are just recommendations, and I don't mean just, but they are recommendations from a work group. And again, I'll let Brian respond to maybe clarify the how they got included in this again. But to be clear, these are just recommendations. BLM is not anticipating implementing these anytime soon. They're going to see what they get, and we will be sending them the comments that we receive. So with that, I'll turn that over to Brian again.
Sure. Yeah, so Laura, the within our work group, important questions come up. For example, what happens if we're here because people have expressed concern through various mechanisms, surveys, and public comment over many decades, really relevant to the Madison. And so, we're looking at all this data and all these comments and talking to members in the community and to address the social issue, which on other parts of the river is crowding both at access points, but also on the river. So for example, on other parts of the river, like the upper and lower river, where people have been surveyed, a little less than 40% of users reported being highly satisfied or satisfied with the number of boats that they saw. More than 60% of users were either neutral or expressed dissatisfaction with the number of boats that they experienced. So, that's of course a very, very different experience than the bear trap. Our concern would be, if we're making recommendations on the entire river, but make no recommendations in the bear trap, what does that do to the bear trap in the future? And we do hear current stories of frustration pretty much at the boat launch area. I think once people are in the canyon and spread out, it's, as you probably know, it's not a place where 500 boats are going down a day. And so back again, so to be very, very specific, the FWP has jurisdiction over water-based recreation everywhere in the state except for wilderness areas and wild and scenic rivers. So BLM, for example, at Warm Springs, which is a BLM access point, they would have the opportunity to set limitations on how many people go there. They kind of do already. They put cones out when that parking lot gets full. But they don't have jurisdiction on how many people are going to float down the river because that's not a wilderness area. Only FWP would have. So again, we directly asked the BLM, when we're looking at all parts of the river, would you like us to also look at the bear trap and make recommendations based on what we're hearing from the community? And the answer we received was yes, that would be appreciated. And so we put a thoughtful set of recommendations to that to hand over to the Bureau of Land Management. And from that point, they will take those. That they have a very, very specific, if they choose to implement a user management program in the bear trap wilderness, that's going to go through a very specific process, which we would not have a part of. And so really the value of the recommendations, and the value of your public comment would be for their recreation managers to consider, we're hearing this from a work group, a citizen work group, we're hearing this from members that make public comment, and should we look at this more closely and consider a river recreation management program for the wilderness area? And if they decide they want to explore that, then that kicks that into a lengthy process that's very regimented and follows federal guidelines of what that would look like. So, and feel free to ask any follow-up questions if I didn't. And again, that's the best extent of my knowledge. I'm not an employee of the BLM. We try to learn as much as we can about the legal structures and of who manages what. So that's the best answer I can give you based on my knowledge.
Commissioner Walsh, you unmuted. Did you have something else to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Deb, I think it's important to move on at this point. That these were soft recommendations to the BLM and not part of this specific charge of the Madison River Work Group.
Okay, I just want to make sure, Laura, you got what you needed on that.
Well, really, no, it's just really confusing because the information, there's anecdotal evidence on the entire Madison River of social conflict, and then FWP did a bunch of studies excluding bear trap and said we need data, and now we have no studies for bear trap. We have only anecdotal evidence. and you're making recommendations to implement a restricted permit system. So
And again, the BLM has their own process. So
Right,
this is
yes.
something that, yeah, this
Thank
is
you.
something that we will not be implementing ourselves, FWP.
And as a member of the public, I know that BLM will take any action from an agency and weight it heavier than the public. So it just.
And again, these are not agency recommendations. I want to make that clear. So they're not taking recommendations from us. They are not FWP recommendations. Okay, so we don't have any other public attending to ask questions. So Commissioner Walsh, is there anything else you'd like us to do or say? We presented all the recommendations, but there's no other member of the public available to ask questions now. Did we lose Commissioner Walsh?
No, I'm just trying to unmute. Sorry about that. Hold
There
on.
are 9 people watching on YouTube, but we did our presentation and there's not much left to say, I guess, right now.
Well, I guess I'd just ask the 9 folks who've tuned in if they want to ask any questions and add to the public dialogue, or if not, please follow the steps that we outlined for giving public comment.
So I will share my screen again. So I leave it up. Let's see. Give me 1 second here. There it is. Okay, so can you see the public comment? Is it big? I can't see it. Oh, and my screen just died. There it is.
No, that's good.
Okay. Okay, so this is how you submit comments. You go to fwp.mt.gov and find the Madison River. I'll go back to show you how I found it. You start here. You go to About FWP. Whoops, let me move this. And you go down, where is it?
If you scroll down the
Public
page.
comments, there we go.
There you go.
Public comments. And you scroll down to Madison River recommendations. And you could watch the YouTube video again if you'd like. Our recommendations are there. And public comment is here. So you click on that, or email or mail to Charlie Sperry.
I think, Deb, the only other piece we might do is allow Zach Brown to introduce himself as a work member.
Oh, did somebody? Okay, let me do that. Oh, yep, I see him. Zach, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, just a public member of the Madison River Work Group, and I'm a Gallatin County Commissioner.
Thank you. I guess Commissioner Walsh, that's all we have.
Deb, I just want to give special thanks to you for attending these meetings, and also to Hope for your help tonight, and to each of the work group members who've been really diligent about attending these meetings and answering questions that came up from the attendees. Really stellar effort.
Well, thank you. I will add, we did get one more comment from YouTube from Blake. He said, "I'm glad I stopped by to listen and learn more about the Madison, and keep up the good work." So
Thanks, Blake.
So thank you everybody for coming tonight. I guess you have your evening free now, and this was the last meeting, and I just want to reiterate that comments are due October 14th by 5 p.m. I believe, and we will be compiling those and presenting them to the commission in December. That's all I have.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you everybody.